The Galinson takeover of Gillingham in 2023 in January breathed fresh life into the Kent club that have plenty of optimism ahead as they look to climb the Football League. But while lots of strides have been made off the pitch, financially and structurally, not quite mirrored on the pitch. They stayed up comfortably in the end in 22-23, but could only manage a mid-table finish in 23-24, dominated, of course, that season by the controversial decision to sack manager Neil Harris, with the team in a competitive position on paper before declining into mid-table under Stephen Clemence, who has since been sacked, and Mark Bonner is tasked with converting resource into results at Priestfield. He's got a competitive top-end budget with Gillingham this season. He's won promotion from this level before with Cambridge United. Can he be the one that kicks this Galinson era at Gillingham into life? We're about to find out in this Summer Deep Dive. Yes, welcome along to the latest EFL Debate Summer Deep Dive, one of many we're doing, 72 in fact to be precise, across the EFL between mid-June and mid-July. Already a few uploaded for League 2 to YouTube and Spotify, so go and check those out once you're done with this one. For now, delighted to be joined by the excellent Matt Boosey from Gills In The Blood TV. Matt, great to have you on. How are you, mate?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. Yeah, it's good to be back talking about Gills. It's been a while, and we all say we get bored and need a rest, but it soon comes around again. And yeah, so it'd be good to talk about some proper football before, I don't know, some little tournament starts in an hour or so.
Absolutely, this is the important stuff.
This is it.
I watched your interview with Mark Bonner, who's the new Gillingham manager, and I'm really excited by how he comes across as someone I've interviewed myself, and he's got very good people skills, and I think that's the one thing that really stands out to me about Mark Bonner, both in his early media appearances at Gillingham and also from his time at Cambridge United, and I imagine you're very excited to have him at the helm.
Yeah, I am, and I know you put a post out a couple of days ago on Twitter and said, or X or whatever it's called now, and said, like, how would you rate your manager out of 10? And of course, it's very tough to tell because we've not seen him do anything with us in terms of anything on the grass. We've just seen him come in and talk a couple of times and obviously buy some players, which we desperately needed. But yeah, going back to what you said about the interview, I think I said to you, there's just an aura about him and a confidence, but it doesn't spill over into arrogance and ego. I think he's a man that very much knows what he wants and he knows how he needs to get there. And he's been quite forthright with that, and he's been quite honest and said that there's still a lot of work and a lot of distance between where we want to be and where we currently are. And that's understandable because regardless of the whys and wherefores, I don't think last season was good enough for a number of reasons. Perhaps the hype was overhyped after 4 1-0 wins at the start of the season under Neil Harris. We knew that was never going to be sustainable. But I think regardless of manager and like I say, the whys and wherefores, I think that group of players was better than 12th place.
Yeah.
Whether that's on, one individual or a collective or a varying amount of reasons, I think is open for debate. But yeah, for whatever reason, 23-24 was just another one of disappointment, and ultimately just felt like transition again, which we've had too much of over the last few years after the relegation and sort of battling at the wrong end of the table in League One for too long. So fingers crossed. But yeah, I'm quietly confident without sort of trying to get ahead of myself because we've not seen a Mark Bonner Gillingham just yet. Got some interesting friendlies early doors as well. I like the way they've gone about that in terms of playing the perceived tougher teams. I think our first team friendly is Millwall at home, and then we've got...
It's quite unusual, isn't it? It's normally Folkestone and Victor away, isn't it?
Yeah, it's usually Folkestone, Faversham or Dover or someone to start, but it looks like they've sort of mixed it up and gone the other way round. So yeah, Millwall and then Watford, I think. There'll probably be some behind closed doors ones as well. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see if we can hit the ground running. And yeah, just looking forward to it, of course, and seeing what a Mark Bonner Gillingham ultimately looks like moving forward. And I think moving forward is probably the two key words, metaphorically and literally, considering all our goal scoring issues over the last few seasons.
I like the link there, but I think it's really important that we look at some of the positives from last season, Matt. To me, the big things to take forward are how strong the defence looked, especially at centre half, because you've got three excellent centre halves in Connor Masterson, Shad Ogie, and Max Amer. But you've also got Ethan Coleman in midfield as well. So you've got some really solid foundations to take with you into next season.
Yeah, I think if you look at, like you say, the positives, again, it comes back to it's very obvious what the issues were, because all the names that you mentioned were defensively minded footballers. Ironically, the one centre half that we deemed weren't quite good enough ended up getting promoted at Wembley in Will Wright. But that's the nature of the beast at football. But yeah, I'm very happy with the trio that we've got. If we can add an extra one, then so be it. But I don't think it's something that's screaming urgent at the moment. I think Mark will predominantly play a back four. So obviously, if you want to switch to a back three or a back five, then you'd probably need another one just to give some cover for injuries and suspensions. But yeah, in terms of Max Amer, Connor Masterson and Shad Ogie, it is three very good centre halves. I think you can add your fullbacks into that as well. I think in terms of the first choice, it'd likely be Romeo, Hutton and Max Clark. And then, like you say, that shield and that protector is Ethan Coleman. I think it's only going to get better and better.
I had a look at the retained list, and I was a little bit surprised to see Scott Malone transfer listed, because of maybe I've sort of I thought he was quite good at times for you last season, and he certainly got that higher league pedigree that made me a little bit surprised that he was transfer listed.
I think it's probably more going to do with wages and the fact that, because we signed Max Clark to be our first choice left back last summer. I think if we'd ask you, if we'd ask any other EFL experts, there's plenty out there that know more than I do about the league as a whole. They'd have said, Max Clark is a first choice left back at League Two level.
Yeah.
But then you don't turn down players of the pedigree of Scott Malone if they become available. But we essentially ended up with two first choice left backs, which is great. You can never have too many good players. I get that. But I'd imagine Scott's probably one of the highest earners. I'd imagine he can probably still go and play at League One level. So if we can get in a couple of players for the wages that we're paying him, then it would make sense moving forward, because people like Scott Malone or Max Clark are, they're too good to be sat on the bench in the fourth division of English football, that's for sure. So I can see why you're surprised from an outsider's perspective, but I think just because of the nature of the quality of the two fullbacks we've got on that side, it makes sense for one to move on, so that we can then strengthen in other areas that are certainly more pressing, which is the top end of the pitch.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and probably good that the club's still being a little bit frugal and a bit sensible with wages, even when they do have this financial advantage. I think that's quite an encouraging aspect of how the club's running itself. I wanted to talk a little bit more detail, Matt, about the centre halves. How important do you think Shad Ogie is going to be this season?
It's interesting because I think he started the season as first choice because Connor Masterson was injured. He picked up a knock in pre-season. So it was Shad and Max that started. And obviously, we've already sort of referenced it. That run at the start of the campaign was unbelievably good in terms of defensive record and winning football matches, which is obviously what it's all about, regardless of how you get there. I've already said it wasn't sustainable. But yeah, Shad and Max were really, really good. I think then, just before Neil Harris was relieved of his duty, I think maybe someone had a word in his ear and said we need to be a bit more proactive with the ball and a little bit more nicer on the eye. So he went with Shad and Connor. For me, that's our worst pairing, because I think they both want to do similar things. They both want to be ball-playing centre halves, and they both want to step into midfield, which then left us a little bit short. I think with Max, you get that security because Max does exactly what he says on the tin. He heads it, he clears it, he tackles, he then goes and gives it to the more technically gifted players, and they go and play, and we try and cause problems in the final third. Not to say that Max can't play, and I think Max has learned to adapt his game over the years, but I think Max is probably more of a defender's defender than the other two.
Okay.
So for me at the moment, I'd say it's probably Max and one other. Whether that's Shad or Connor Masterson, I've got no issue at all. Connor was player of the season for us last year. Shad was young player of the season, I think. So it's a nice problem to have.
Sure.
I think, there's elements of Shad's game and also Connor's. They're still young in centre-back terms. Connor's only 25. Shad's 22, 23. They've got loads of learning still to do, and they'll only get better, whether that's with us or, the nature of the beast of football at our level is that they end up moving on to a bigger club, and that helps balance the books and all that type of stuff. So, yeah, I think, Max Amer's still got a big part to play, and don't get me wrong, if we went first game of the season, whether that is, and they said Connor and Shadogi are our centre out for starting. It's not a disaster, but I just think they like to do similar things, which could left us exposed a couple of times last season. But you never know; they might have learnt with the benefit of a year, so it might work better moving forward. But I just like that experience and Max Amos. So for me, it'd be Max with Shadow or Connor, or maybe by the time the season comes around, there might be another option. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's great to have those options as well.
The other option, just to interject, was that Stephen Clemence, before he was sacked, actually played Shad as a left back final day of the season. Wanted to have a look at him there, so you can see he was a centre half. He was a little bit like a fish out of water. He kept tucking inside, and we were very narrow, and we got caught on the outside a few times. I think Luke Molyneux was playing out there that day until the red card. But yeah, it might be another options in terms of attributes that Shad has. He's quick, he's powerful, he's athletic. So I don't think they're bad attributes to have as a fullback. But I don't like it if it's someone that's played centrally all season and then you're asking them to go and play wide, because the natural tendency is to drop inside and then it leaves space on the outside. But it could be something that we look at. I think I've said a few times in terms of what we need in terms of signings. If we can get someone who plays left centre half or left back, can cover both, then happy days. It might be that Shad ends up being that person, but time will ultimately tell.
Yeah, I suppose when you talk of versatility, Robbie McKenzie is the name that comes to mind.
Yep.
He's obviously got a shot at maybe being a bit of a utility player this year. I think in terms of centre half, it'd be difficult for him to get in, and probably, if I'm honest, either the fullback positions as well. It would probably rely on an injury or two. But I mean, again, you want versatile players coming in, and I wanted to talk about him firstly, and then also about Giles, who's another young lad who's come through the academy, who was listed on the retained list that the club released in May.
I think McKenzie, unfortunately, probably suffers from his own versatility, similarly to like someone at a higher level like Jamie Callagher did for years at Liverpool and England, probably more predominantly. He's probably second choice right back, second choice left back, backup centre half, and backup holding midfielder, if I'm honest. And that's no bad thing. I don't think it's a problem. Every squad, I think, at League Two, unless you've got Wrexham budgets or Stockport last season where you can afford to go and buy two in every position. I think most squads need someone that can fill in 2 or 3 roles, which is why I like Robbie McKenzie. But I just think he suffers from that versatility, which means he's never going to be first choice in any of them roles. But it's not a bad backup to have. I'm not a fan of him playing left back, I won't lie. I think you end up, especially if you play an inverted winger as well, because then you've got everyone stepping into traffic all the time and it becomes too easy to play against. I like fullbacks that play on the outside, but again, if he has to do it on the odd occasion, then so be it. There'd be worse backup left backs if Robbie McKenzie ends up being that. Alex Giles, we've not seen loads of. I think he had a couple of loans last season. I think was at Chatham for a period of the season, who only just missed out on getting promoted to National League South. It seems highly rated. There was quite a few of the kids that were let go, but I think Alex Giles and Sam Gale were the two that sort of stood out to be kept, along with Joe Bode, who's been retained. So it'd be interesting. I mean, we had Sam on our table at the end of season dinner, and obviously it might have changed because it was Stephen Clemence then, but he sort of intimated that he'd be given a chance in pre-season at worst. So hopefully Mark Bonner will do the same thing, because they're low risk, aren't they? They're not going to be on loads of wages. If they're not quite ready, then you send them on loan and give them games somewhere else down the pyramid. But if they do,
you know what, Matt? I completely agree with you on that in terms of the progression plan, because what you want to do, rather than just decide before pre-season this player is definitely going to get loaned out, you actually get a look at them so you can gauge where they're at in a more detailed sort of way. But also, it's like if they massively overperform with the first team squad in training and then play against, do well in pre-season, then all of a sudden you've got a player on your hands who could come into the squad. And then if they do themselves proud but aren't quite ready, then you can say, yes, let's loan them out. But I always like to think you want to give these players a chance in pre-season just to gauge where they're at, really.
Oh yeah, couldn't agree more. Like I say, they're low risk in terms of wages, in terms of contract length, and you're not losing anything by giving these kids an hour or half hour in friendlies. And you never know, if he has to play against Millwall and he's really, really good, then it saves you a few quid on a signing. And it's I think, generally fans of clubs like Gillingham, they want to sing that song, don't they? He's one of our own, and Gills have not had enough of that over the last few years. I think Jack Tucker was probably the last one, but if you're going back to the last real success story, it was probably Bradley Dack, who's been gone 7 years now. So it'd be nice if one of them can step up. So like I say, there's a couple of options with him and Sam Gale, who I think play similar positions, albeit probably slightly different in terms of style. I think Sam's probably...
Sam's a midfielder, according to my notes.
I think he can play centre half. I think he plays holding midfield as well, which I think is based on the style of play. I think he's another one that likes to carry the ball out from the back, whereas I think Alex Giles is a little bit more physical, better in the air. That's not. I'm saying Sam's not good in the air, but I'm only basing it off of a little bit of football that I've seen him play. But yeah, it's good to have options. And like I say, further up the pitch, Joe Bode, if we can finally... I mean, he nearly scored the winner last day of the season against Doncaster, which would have been brilliant sending him into the summer, but with Joe, I just get the feeling that he's probably approaching last chance saloon now. He's had a few loans. He's had a few goes in the first team, still yet to score a senior goal. But again, he's low risk. He's 18. Built like a middleweight boxer. So, yeah, it would be great if he can kick on this season and play a part. Yeah,
let's hope he can do that. I wanted to ask you about Romeo Hutton, Matt, because when I spoke to Scott Lindsay when he was Swindon manager, he argued very much for Romeo Hutton being one of the best right backs in League Two, which obviously bodes well for you coming into this campaign. What did you see from him in the second half of last season?
I think he was definitely a step up on what we had, and that's no disrespect to Che Alexander or Robbie McKenzie again. I think in terms of what you look for in a modern fullback, Romeo Hutton has all the attributes. I've said this plenty of times to yourself and others, but I think fullbacks' roles have changed. Maybe not so much at our level, but it seems to be now that they look at like assists and ball passing ability and that type of thing over how well they can tackle or defend these days. I think he was directly involved in one goal after joining, which doesn't look great shakes considering the amount of crosses he puts into the box and the amount of assists he'd had over the last couple of years before joining us. But to be fair to Romeo, I'd probably say that was down to either good goalkeeping, poor finishing, and just bad luck. He could have probably had 5 or 6 assists with a bit more luck in terms of, I think there was probably 2 or 3 times Ollie Hawkins' headers that were either saved or should have been on target and missed. Sure. And ironically, the assist that he did actually get was a long ball over the top for Josh Andrews at home to Barrow, rather than him being in the final third and whipping in a dangerous delivery that way. But yeah, I think, again, he'll be another player that goes from strength to strength next season under Mark Bonner. And I just think, similarly to, like I said, with Conor Mahoney, I think he'll benefit if he's got better players around him, because we were fairly easy to play against last season, Gabe, because you'd go, right, if you stop Johnny Williams or you stop Conor Mahoney and you stop Romeo Hutton, you stop Gillingham. It wasn't hard to work out how to stop where we was going to be a threat, because we didn't have enough of them. But whereas, next season, I know we'll probably talk about the new signings, but we've got Josh Andrews now. We've got Elliot Nevitt. We've got Armani Littles coming. We've got pace in Aaron Rowe. We've got trickery and delivery in terms of Jack Nolan. People are going to be aware of Jack Nolan and potentially Aaron Rowe, which then gives your fullbacks more space to play in as well. So I think there'll be more players that we've already got that organically will become a bigger threat, because they might have more space to play in compared to last season, where you just knew we're going to stand on the right back, he doesn't get the ball, Gillingham are not a threat. So yeah, looking forward to seeing Romeo next season.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to touch on midfield, Matt, because one thing that's kind of on my mind a bit with the Armani Littles partnership with Ethan Coleman is there going to be enough creativity in the sort of deeper midfield areas? Because it's one thing having those star performers in the attacking positions, and I am quite excited about some of the signings that you've made, but I also think you've got to be able to create from deep. And yeah, I'm just wondering, is there, do you think Ethan Coleman can create from deep?
I think he can. And again, it'd be similar to answer to what we just said about Romeo Hutton. I think if there's people more aware of the wingers or the 10 or the centre forward, then Ethan might have a little bit more time and a little bit more space when he gets the ball in the middle of the park. For me, there was lots of times throughout the last campaign where he'd look to be progressive and pass through the lines and, fizz it into feet of the centre forward or in behind the centre half for the fullback or the winger to go on. But whether that was a lack of confidence or a lack of ability or a combination of them things, invariably he'd look up and there wouldn't be that option. So he'd then have to go backwards or go square to his centre midfield partner. And again, little I don't know loads and loads about. I've watched bits of him at Wimbledon, and I remember looking at him in the National League for Torquay a couple of seasons ago before he went to Forest Green and thought he was a good player. Mark spoke of him when he joined and said that he can do that role where he just sits and controls it from deep, or he can be that one that's progressive and running with the ball higher up the pitch. So maybe if you play Coleman and Little together, it might free up space for one or the other if the other one just sits and drops. I just think in terms of, everyone knows what Gills lack: creativity, pace, power and goals in the final third. But if you look at the nuances and that a little bit more, I just think there's going to be players that we've got that subtly will just become better and look better players because of the fact that we'll be a more rounded team, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess one of the players that you've brought in is Jack Nolan from Accrington Stanley, who's certainly Mark seems really excited about as a signing. And so he had an excellent season last year for Accrington Stanley, delivered the big numbers as well, which is always the first thing you look for when you sign a winger. So looks like an exciting signing, Jack Nolan.
Yeah, definitely. Again, obviously, we can only go off numbers and what we've seen at Accrington, and you never know how it's going to work when you join a new club. But in terms of what we've got, not just in Jack, but the others as well, they're definitely people that we need in areas that we need, with attributes that we need. And the thing that I like is they've all done it at League Two level this past season. We're not saying, not to dig him out, but we're not going, oh, we've got Macaulay Bond, who was good a couple of seasons ago, or, oh, Macaulay Bond scored goals at high level 4 years ago. We've got people that have literally done it in the last 6 to 12 months. And I'm liking that because it means that they're ready-made for League Two. You're not asking someone to come in and adjust like a Scott Malone. Can he do it in League Two, where it's a bit more hustle and bustle, where it's different to the Championship? We're not asking someone to come in and go, oh, like I said, Macca, we done it for QPR a few seasons ago, scored goals in the National League for Orient in 2019. Can he do it? There's less question marks for me over the signings that are coming in, which then gives you a little bit more margin for error, I say, because they're proven, they do what they've said on the tin and that type of thing. But yeah, Jack Nolan specifically, everything that we need: trickery, direct, left foot, right foot, go on the outside, can drop inside into shooting positions as well. And yeah, it's something that we've certainly missed. Connor Mahoney was probably the one that we had last season. But again, I'll come back to that point. If you mark Connor Mahoney, I felt sorry for him at times because he'd have two on him and that'd be it, threat nullified. So if you can get him and then row the other side, and Johnny Williams thriving in the 10, and you've got Nevitt bustling up front and being a pain in the arse for centre backs, you then create space for Little or Dieng or Coleman,
or Johnny Williams,
or any of these, to get these wide players with pace into threatening areas where they can deliver balls into the box. So yeah, I mean, it's very exciting, Jack Nolan. What was it, 17 goals, 8 assists last season? You can't argue with that at all.
Yeah, I also do really like the Aaron Rose signing. I'm possibly more excited about the Aaron Rose signing than Jack Nolan. And the reason I would say that is because, in terms of if you're looking at the last 12 months, Jack Nolan probably looks like the better signing. But I think with Aaron Rowe, I actually really liked him at Huddersfield in the Championship, and I know he was very highly rated there before maybe a couple of injuries sort of set him back from maybe fulfilling the potential that he was hoping to. But the one thing I don't think Mark did actually mention in when speaking about Aaron Rowe is he is very good on either foot, and he's been very versatile when he was at Huddersfield. So I think he could play as a wing back or out wide, possibly even in midfield. So very versatile and a very difficult player to kind of predict. So he's got that. A bit of a grandiose but universality. So I like that, and I think he's got that in his locker as well as the sort of directness as well, which you always want in a winger. So for me, Aaron Rowe looks like a really exciting signing. That's caught my eye.
Yeah, just out and out pace. Just them words have been like, we've not heard them words for far too long. But yeah, I think he played as a 10, didn't he, in the playoff final as well?
Possibly,
I think they had. Didn't they play Long and Tracy from the sides? And then, I mean, it was quite versatile. So, if one drifted inside, then Rowe would go and play on the other side and that type of thing. But yeah, I think he actually started as a 10. And I thought first half, he was probably Crew's best player that day at Wembley. And the other thing I like was, just sort of interject again, because I'm remembering it, is we're building a squad that's almost got ready-made relationships as well. If you think Nolan and Josh Andrews first half of last season would have played together at Accrington, Rowe and Nevitt would have played together at Crewe. You've got Williams and Hutton that played together at Swindon. So there's already sort of that could be half your team. that have already have got some sort of relationship. I know you'll have to sort of tweak it and improve it because of how Mark Bonner will specifically want to play, but it does no harm that if you've got players that have played together and done fairly well together previously. But yeah, Rowe for me, just because of the fact that he's out and out quick and the words, very good one-on-one. I can't wait to see that. And hopefully, if he can have an injury-free season, he could flourish at the level.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Johnny Williams is a really interesting one for me because I've seen him previously at this level, and he's one of those players that I don't come across too often. But in League Two, it's like Nicky Adams was another one, bit of a promotion specialist, where you just feel like they think a split second ahead of this level. And for me, Johnny Williams is like that. And I appreciate we've not yet seen that side of him at Gillingham. But what I'm quite excited about is with the extra pace that we've talked about, Hutton obviously coming in January, and then Rowe and Nolan coming in this summer. I think it's going to accelerate the play for Gillingham that I think is going to bring Johnny Williams to a new level, because for me, I don't think he's necessarily creative in terms of like give him the ball from a standing start and he's going to create something out of nothing. I think it's in the 1-2s, in the quick, the sort of the angle of the passes, the sort of subtleties, that it's short passes, but they're just weighted perfectly. And those kind of moves work better when you've got pace around them and willing runners. So Elliot Nevitt, who we'll come on to, real stretch defences. You've got the wingers stretching the play. And I think that's going to help Johnny Williams, possibly in the number 10 role, just bring that sort of creative mind to the scene. So that's one thing that I'm really excited about as well.
Oh, absolutely. And if you look at his numbers last season, you go, he's had a poor season. I think it's 1 goal in the EFL Trophy and 1 assist in the league at home to Salford. So you look at that and you go, Williams has had a shocker. When I think it was like 10 and something, it was, I think it was essentially, it was almost double figures for both at Swindon the season before. But yeah, totally agree. Like, you can get him in the 10 now. Like, the amount of times we'd have had it last season where if Johnny had found space and Coleman whizzes it into his feet, now, like you say, you've got Nolan or Rowe or potentially Nevitt or Andrews will be on their bike, a little flick round the corner in between the centre halves, and they're in on goal. We just didn't have that last season. So I think there was a lot of times where Johnny would play that pass, but we either weren't alert to it or we just didn't have enough pace in the final third to be able to implement that style of play. So it was almost like, and I'm not bigging up Johnny and saying that he was brilliant, because he wasn't. Sure. We weren't as a collective and he wasn't individually, but there were certainly flashes of that player that you've mentioned. And again, like you say, if there's more space for players to run into, I think he will thrive now, because when that ball comes into his feet and he just knocks it off first time, you'll have someone that's willing to gamble and get in behind and want to play. And we also have to remember that he got shunted out to the left plenty of times last season as well, which is not his game.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm kind of just looking at squad depth at the moment, and especially up top. I mean, I've kind of been having this conversation working off the presumption that Mark Bonner's going to play 4-2-3-1, because I would say that's been the formation that he's liked previously in his career, and the signings would kind of back that up. But if it's only one up top, which isn't a guarantee, because actually when he was at Cambridge in League Two, they did play Ironside and Mullin simultaneously. So it could be 2 up top. But if it's only one, then you've got Josh Andrews, Hawkins and Nevitt all competing for one spot. And then you've also got Ashley Naderson, who may be offloaded, and Gabode, who might be loaned out. But even if it's 3 strikers, that's a lot of players. I mean, you're going to have to use
two of them have been made available for transfer. So
okay, so Naderson and Gabode are available for transfer, are they?
Naderson and Hawkins have been made available for transfer.
Right, okay.
So I think, to be honest, no disrespect to Wally, who's been, he's been very good for us in a side that doesn't score loads of goals. I think he scored 7 or 8 in a year, and he missed the first half of last season. So in 18 months, so yeah, 6-7 goals in a year. Did what we needed to get us from 24th to 17th at the back end of 22-23. Is he the centre forward to take you from 12th into the playoffs, the top 3? I'm not sure, especially the way Mark Bonner wants his teams to play. I don't think he's mobile enough. Oddly, I'd say if we couldn't offload both of them, I think Ashley Naderson would be the one that would be more suited to a Mark Bonner style of play if he could get his confidence back and his fitness back, because he gets about the park. He's quick. Yeah. Confidence is obviously a huge thing with Naderson, and it's on the floor at the moment, understandably. But yeah, I'd imagine one of them will definitely go. So then you're saying Andrews, Nevitt are going to be your first choice, and then maybe one of them two, and then Bode if he kicks on in pre-season. So for me, I think they might still look at maybe another attacker, whether that's, someone that could play across the front three. I'm not sure. Again, obviously, you don't know, do you? We've done this first phase that Joe Comper, the managing director, spoke about. I think now there'll be a lull, maybe try and get some out, but we know what it's like with players that are under contract that have been made available. They've been made available for a reason. So they're not going to be everybody's first choice when there's plenty of good free agents available, or people like Jack Nolan that you can pay a small fee to get it away from the tribunal, that have had a belting season the year before. But yeah, I think I think he'll probably run with 3 senior strikers and maybe Bode. So whatever guys that is, depending on who we can offload and at what time as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think if you do bring in another striker, it's probably best to have someone who can play another position, just to sort of make sure that you've got those options. Because I guess at first glance, the wide areas, although you have brought in Aaron Rowe and Jack Nolan, and that's great, and obviously Johnny Williams can play one of those positions as well. You've got Jaden Clark there, who can play on the right wing. Where do we think Jaden Clark's at the moment?
Jaden Clark's an interesting one, because I did them polls at the end of last season and said, what would you do with these players? And for me, Jaden Clark was, he's 21, come out of non-league, was playing semi-professional for Dulwich 18 months ago. I think the progress he's made from where he was has been decent enough. But again, is he a player that's going to be first choice or going to come on and change games for a side that's got aspirations of, dare I say it, probably the top 3 next season?
Yeah.
Maybe not, but I wouldn't write him off. So again, it'd be one that I'd look at loaning out if we don't think he's ready after a bit of pre-season. Yeah, I'd say he probably plays either side, can play in the 10, but in terms of, if you compare him to Johnny Williams, Jack Nolan, Aaron Rowe, he's probably some way off of all 3 of them at the moment. So he's very much a backup option for me. So yeah, we definitely need probably at least one more wide player. I don't want Johnny Williams going out there. Johnny Williams has to play in the 10 for me. Jules Lapsley's another one that's been made available for transfer. So it says to me that Johnny's going to be the first choice as that attacking midfielder, or as, I don't know, with the other option is you play Ethan sitting, and then you almost play a 4-1-4-1. You could as well, a various sort of thing on that. And I wouldn't mind that. But I just think with the players that we bought in and the intent that we've shown, you've got to go 4-2-3-1 for me, and Johnny's got to be as close to that centre forward as possible.
Yeah, I guess so. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, is there a world where George Lapsley doesn't get any offers and then, or doesn't sort of a move for him doesn't happen, and then he actually makes an impression in pre-season and can actually work his way back into the team? Because I do rate him as a pressing 10.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you look at the George Lapsley that we signed from Mansfield, one of the best players in the division in that role. Yeah. For one reason or another, it's just not worked at Gills. Niggling injuries, again, was probably played out of position under Neil Harris when he arrived, because Neil was playing 4-4-2 because needs must, and it was just keeping us solid to get us enough points to stay up. So he was playing on the right-hand side of midfield, which isn't his game. He's not going to run in behind. He's not physical enough to do any other sides of the game. But don't get me wrong, Gabe, if we go first game of the season and we've got Johnny Williams in the 10 and his backup's George Lapsley, I'm not going to be sitting here going, oh, dearie me, that's an appalling, set of options in the attacking midfield role. But ultimately, pre-season will tell, won't it? And we don't know what George wants to do. If George has been told that he's not first choice, he might want to move. So do you then want to keep a player that's not going to be first choice and might upset the apple cart? I'm not saying, that George would do that. I don't think that's in his character. But ultimately, time will tell with these players that have been made available for transfer. Same way as if we go into the first game of the season and we can choose from Max Clark and Scott Malone at left back. Happy days. But I just think the sensible thing is, we've got to remember, there's a lot of these players that played in a team that massively underperformed last season. And George particularly, Ollie, Scott, I'd imagine are on decent wages, because Ollie and George we signed January to keep us up. We probably paid over the odds. Scott, I'd probably say is top 3 earners at the club. So you could maybe, if you got rid of them 3, you could probably get 5 good players in, good League 2 players. So it's going to be a balancing act, isn't it, in terms of what they offer as players, but what you can potentially get in, and lower the average age as well, because they're all I think George is the youngest at 27. Scott and Ollie are probably both 33 each now. They're certainly approaching the veteran stage of their career.
Talk to me about Jake Turner then, Matt, and the season that's in store for him.
It's tricky with goal, isn't it? Because it always seems to be, I think it's one position where you go, pre-season starts, it's clean slate again. And obviously Glenn Morris is a very, very keeper at the level, and he's still at 40 or whatever he is now. He's like Benjamin Button, isn't he? Just gets better with age. Seems to, be going in reverse. But Jake Turner, again, I keep repeating myself, I wouldn't be disappointed with either if we went to the first game of the season. It was Glenn or Jake. But I thought Jake improved massively last season from what we saw in his first campaign with us. Like anyone, he benefited from playing games. He benefited from the advice of Glenn. Benefited from having a very good goalkeeper coach in Darren Ibrahim as well. If you're asking me to say who's my number one going into the first game of the season, I'd probably go with Jake. I know there's question marks over his distribution, his ability to play with his feet, but I'm slightly old school. Your keeper's your keeper for me. He's there to stop other teams scoring. If he can play, then fair enough. That's a big bonus. But yeah, he's everything you want in a keeper, isn't he? 6'5", 6'6". He's big, he's commanding, he's loud. He's a very good shot stopper. He's still learning. He's still young in terms of being a goalkeeper, 24, 25. But I think to be where he is at his stage of his career and then the age he's at, we've got a very, very good goalkeeper who could stay or progress through the leagues with us if we did get promoted. I don't think he'd look at a place in League One, but again, ultimately time will tell, and it might not even be Jake in between the sticks come the first game of the season. But yeah, he had a very good season. Again, start of the campaign, he stood out because we're keeping clean sheets. Was absolutely brilliant at Crawley. That was probably the best goalkeeping performance I saw from anyone last season. Saved a penalty at 0-0. Probably won us the game just from that save alone. Made 3 or 4 other saves. We was under the cosh, got absolutely battered. How we didn't concede that day, I'll never know in a month of Sundays. But that was very the definition of, it was almost, you felt bad for him. Like you almost wanted to buy a round of drinks leaving the ground after that one because we got away with that day. And Jake played a massive part in that. But I like Jake Turner. I think he took a lot of undue stick last season because he couldn't play with his feet as well as Glenn was perceived to be able to do so. But similarly to what I said about Max Amott, your keeper's there to stop goals going in the net. And he does that very well. I think he had, 12, 13 clean sheets in about 37 games last season? That's 1 in 3. Does that over a full season, you've got 15, 16 clean sheets. You're going to have a chance of being where you want to be.
I like that you said you almost wanted to buy a round of drinks, not just buy a drink. It's like you're a charitable man. You'll buy drinks for other people.
Oh, it was ridiculous. Honestly, it was one of them. Honestly, I don't know. If you watch the highlight, I don't know how we got away with it. We should have been out of sight after about 25 minutes. And then bless them, they scored the goal for us as well that afternoon.
Sure. So I think you've got a great start in terms of squad. I think I really like the business that you've done early doors. And I suppose if I'm trying to pinpoint how many more players you're going to need, a lot's going to depend on whether some of those transfer listed players get taken up. If that side of things goes as hoped, I'm imagining you're probably going to be looking at another 1, 2, 3,
5,
4, 5. What were you thinking?
5.
About 5. Yeah, that's something I could go along with that.
I've listed our squad without the available players in it. So by my calculations, we've got 17 senior pros at the moment. That's excluding Malone, Lapsley, Naderson and Hawkins. So I'm writing them off.
Oh, right. Okay.
At the moment. So 17, if you get 5, that gives you 22. I like to go off of, on average, 1 position. It might not be quite that because you've got Robbie McKenzie. But so like I said, if we buy a centre back or a left back, that would cover that side, and Robbie could do the gap filling, so to speak. So if we sign
a left-footed player that can play centre half, or
I think so. Yeah, someone
preferably someone on the younger side that you'd be able to develop and underneath.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, I think it's going to have to be a younger one. I don't think you're going to sign someone who's in the latter stage of his career and say, "Oh, you want to come in and be backup left back and backup centre half." It wouldn't work. So 1 there. Dom Jeffries looks like he's probably moving on to maybe another central midfielder.
Sure.
Because we've only got, if you're saying Johnny's a 10, then in terms of orthodox centre midfielders, you've probably only got Ethan, Timmy and Amani Little. So you probably need 1 more there.
Happy with Jaden Clark as backup right winger to Aaron Ray? If Rowe gets injured first
Depends.
day
Again, that's for me. That massively depends on pre-season with Jaden.
Okay.
So yeah, what we got? So yeah, centre half or centre back, left back or centre back, and then Robbie Gapfields, centre midfielder.
Timothy Dieng we've not mentioned yet. I think it could be a big season for him.
Timmy was brilliant. Timmy was probably, I think I said to someone a couple of weeks ago, Timmy was probably the one player that didn't want the season to end when it did. He was absolutely flying. I think it was like 5 goals, 3 assists in his last 12. Winner against Wrexham, second goal against Salford that clinched it, equaliser at Morecambe. I think there was free kick at home to Donny final day of the season. So yeah, Timmy was absolutely flying. And I think after the injury that he suffered at the start of September, so he missed a month, he was the one that probably didn't want the season to end when it did. So yeah, I think Timmy's still got a massive part to play. And we've spoken before, you can almost cheat with Timmy. So if Johnny Williams isn't available, you can almost play Timmy as the 10 and just go a little bit more direct and play off of him and the centre forward. So I think there's definitely a role for him to play. We've gone off on a tangent. 5, maybe
no,
a centre midfielder, maybe 2 versatile attackers, maybe someone.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Matt, maybe a winger who can play on either side.
Yeah, I think that would be the one. And then the other one, the name that keeps coming up is the lad getting him back from Watford potentially if they allow him to go.
Hurtado.
Jorge Hurtado, yeah, because it's a very small, segment of football. But for 3 cameos, he was absolutely ridiculous. Whether he can do it over a 46-game season is a completely different question. Sure. But I think it reminds me of Tino Asprilla when he first arrived in the Premier League. And half the time, I don't think he knew what his legs were doing. So what chance have defenders got if he's not sure where he's going himself? That was how I thought of Hurtado. Absolutely fearless. But
could he play in one of those to other attacking positions beyond centre forward, do you think?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. You could maybe use him from the... Again, we've got very little to go off. I mean, he only played once for Watford before we signed him, and I think he played 45 minutes against Walsall, 45 against Swindon, and about 15 minutes at Notts County to help us see out the game. But yeah, there was certainly something about him that was exciting and very unknown. So whether he could be one that could play as a 9 and from the side as well, who knows? But I think we'll have to wait for Watford on that one.
The other moving piece of the jigsaw of this, Matt, that's kind of occurred to me is so Bonner. I think the most common formation Bonner's used is 4-2-3-1, but in his promotion-winning season at Cambridge, he did quite often play a 4-4-2 diamond, and the squad does kind of lend itself to that a little bit, you could argue. Not so much with the signings of Nolan. Maybe I think Rowe might be versatile enough to play in a midfield, somewhere in a midfield diamond, possibly one of the wide spots.
You could play him as
so go on.
Or you could play him as a 10, I think, looking at how he played for Crewe. So
yeah, number 10 possibly. So I suppose what interests me about that is I would think that if 4-4-2 diamond is a consideration for Bonner, then you would need, I think, 2 extra attacking fullbacks. And I don't know whether you're going to prioritise that in the budget because you've already got Robbie McKenzie
I can't see it being a priority to do that, no. Because, again, you're trying to buy for roles that you've already got when we're so desperately needed improvements in other areas. But I see your point, absolutely. Yeah. You'd probably say then we need a couple of centre midfielders as well.
Sure.
Because you'd maybe have Rowe and Williams that could play as a 10, Ethan Coleman deep, Armani Little and Timmy from the sides of the diamond, then that's it. You haven't got anything else.
Sure. Okay, so maybe not the 4-4-2 diamonds then. I think it just occurred to me because Johnny Williams behind 2 strikers could be fun.
Absolutely.
But it's weighing up the cost and the
that's it. It's how many you can get out to, how many you can get in, and then when does tweaks become overhauls, that type of thing.
And also I think you kind of want to 4-2-3-1 looks like a good solid template to work with, and what you don't want to do is rip too much up and then end up you want to sort of start with a template that you can move smoothly into the season.
You'll have options and a couple of ways to play, but at the same time, you don't want to be changing it every 45 minutes or every week because then people are just not going to know what their roles are. And I'd say, like you said, the fact that we signed Nolan and Nevitt and Rowe particularly says it's going to be a variation of 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1. Yes, 100%.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How big a season do you think is ahead for Ethan Coleman? Because he seems to have, I think the year before last, he really grabbed the shirt off Sean Williams, who's an experienced midfielder at this level, and became one of the first names on the team sheet last season. Do you think he can be one of the best midfielders in the league this year?
When did he join? January 2023. So no, I disagree slightly that he was a regular that season.
Okay, but he sort of showed signs of getting in
He was
ahead.
very good in cameos. I think his debut was against Bradford, and he come on and we'd lost the game. We were 2-0 down. Andy Cook masterclass that night, and he just come on last 20 minutes. And you always say about the best players, they just look like they've got a bit of extra time on the ball. And he just come on, and you think, oh, he's going to be a bit timid. He's not going to be that brave. But he come on, he was passing through the lines. He wanted to play forward. He wanted to run forward, but without losing that discipline and understanding that he was a central defensive midfielder. And then I don't think he was due to start first game of the season at Stockport either. And I think Timmy Dieng pulled a groin the week in training. Right. He's absolutely immaculate next to Sean Williams, ironically. And then he has become Sean Williams, and the understudy very much became the master. And he had a brilliant season. I know a few people levelled it at him that he wasn't progressive enough with the ball. But again, I think that's more to do with the fact that we were just so impotent in the final third that you could have made Kevin De Bruyne look like a bang average centre midfielder in our team without being horrible. Kevin De Bruyne just going backwards and square to his left back and his right back.
That's interesting. So it's much more about improving in more attacking areas, and then your deeper players are going to get better, as opposed to needing to get more from your deeper players in order to get more from your attacking players.
I think we'll see. I think our deeper players will naturally look better if we've got better options in the final third. Because, like I said earlier, I think that Coleman loads of times wanted to try and be progressive with it, but because there was no options in front of him, he then had to come back or go to his centre half, and we'd start again. And then the jeering and the angst from the crowd starts because we're just, you can keep the ball. You can keep the ball and be nice, but if you're doing it in your own half and you do it on the edge of your own box, it means absolutely nothing, Gabe. You know that. You can make 600 passes between your centre halves and your holding midfielder and your centre backs. You're not going to score a goal. Yeah. So I genuinely believe that, and I'm not just saying that because I rate him, but there's people that are more qualified for me to talk about Ethan Coleman, and he was voted player of the season at Gills. So I think if 23 other senior pros at Gills thought he was decent, then for me he's a good player.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I wanted to touch on the excitement of, I guess, what's possible for Gillingham under Brad and Shannon Galinson's ownership. I know we've talked about this before, and it feels like at the cusp of a really exciting era for Gillingham, just once the footballing side kind of starts to match the strides you're making off the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, we've said before at the beginning, they came in and they made small, quick gains with little tweaks here and there that made the match day experience better. And we've always said, you want your football team to win, but you also want to have a good experience. So if the football does go wrong, you've still had a half decent day. And they did that brilliantly. And then you see things like the electric hoardings, which not only look nice, so they're aesthetically pleasing, but they're actually making us money. And I think they're sold out for the whole season already, which is ridiculous. Season ticket sales are brilliant again. Like, it's unknown for Gills over the last 25 years, and this isn't to bash Paul Scally, but like the last 2 years, we've had our kits out end of May, middle of June. Like, for years and years, you weren't even getting them for the first game of the season as a fan. And it's just little things like that that make a huge difference for a supporter and then the interaction on social media, it costs nothing, but it makes fans feel valued. So, it's just now a case of over to Mark Bonner and his coaching team and the players and just tying it up so that the off-field stuff is matched with the on-field stuff. And if we do that, then it could be very exciting for the next few years. And I know Brad said he's impatient to get out of this division. And obviously there were question marks over the sacking of Stephen Clemence, but I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to be successful. And I think the risk, for whoever made the decision, Brad, Shannon, Kenny, Joe, Compa, we don't want to be in a position on the pitch where we were October last season, where you give a manager a transfer window in the summer, give him 8, 10, 12 games and then decide it's not working. And then you've got someone coming and he's having to work with another person's tool. So I think, my opinion on Stephen Clemence, Gabe, I'm not going to sit here and go over old ground too much because a lot of people disagree with me and said he's deserved the summer, but there was nothing for me that suggested we were going to get better next season under Stephen Clemence. I think we won 5 of our last 20. I think in terms of form table under the last 6, we were bottom. I think we were like 23rd under the last 10, 15th over the last 12. They're not signs of progression, which he was brought in to do when he was appointed. So for me, that was the right call, just to go off on another tangent. But yeah, it's like I say, the Galinsons have done very little wrong. Certainly off the pitch, they've got everything right, I think. You know, there was a little quibble over season tickets last season, or technicality, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. But no, they've been absolutely brilliant and an absolute breath of fresh air since arriving 18 months ago. The first step was to feel like you had your football club back, which we did. We then had that sort of high of getting ourselves safe and just remembering how to win football matches and enjoy winning football matches again. Obviously, the next step is always difficult, isn't it? It's harder to improve from bottom of the league to halfway up. Now we've got to try and improve from halfway down to top 7, top 3. And I'm not going to sit here and say we're going to win the league. But yeah, I'm as confident as I've been in a long time watching my football club. I mean, that might come back and bite me on the arse in about 3 months, but so be it.
Absolutely. No, I think it all looks very exciting on paper.
Yeah.
It's just about whether it comes together or
just got to transport it onto the green stuff, haven't we? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, small matter of that. So I want to talk. So obviously, the ambition is promotion next season. Would you say that top 7 is an expectation rather than a target for this season?
Yeah, I think it probably is. And I'm not saying that's my opinion, but I think certainly as outsiders like yourself and, you know, like other good channels, podcasts, experts, that sort of thing, NTT20, I think if you ask outsiders now, I think people are going to say that certainly Brad Galinson is expecting to be in the top 7 because, you know, he's gone hard with the budget early.
Yeah.
You can't argue with that. You can't say that Mark Bonner's not being backed. Again, I don't think Stephen Clemence wasn't backed. I mean, we bought 4 in January. Romeo, Hutton, we paid a fee for. Josh Andrews, we paid a fee for. He was just injured, which obviously didn't help in the here and now, but I understand it was a mid to longer term project with Josh. You can't legislate for Jorge being injured. All right, Josh Walker didn't work out for whatever reason. But no, in terms of this season, I think if you ask 100 fans in the EFL, in League 2, 99 say that Gillingham should be in the top 7 come next May, and that brings its own pressures. But that's good pressure, isn't it? I'd rather be watching a team that's under that kind of pressure than trying to stay in the Football League.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, it's been up until last season, it's been a long time since Gillingham were one of the favourites for a division rather than sort of one of the underdogs, if you like, which you are in very much in League 1. So with that in mind, that we're saying top 7 is the expectation and probably top 3 is the target, I think we can agree. What would be the big reasons, just to condense everything we've talked about in this podcast, Matt, what would be the big reasons for you to believe that Gillingham will achieve their ambitions?
Brad Galinson's desire and impatience to get into League 1 and his enthusiasm for it as well. And one of the biggest things that he's done since he came in was that he didn't just come in and buy a football club in England. He really took the time, him and Shannon, to understand what Gillingham was about, understand what the fan base was about, the area, the town, and understand what Gillingham as a football team should look like. Maybe we've not got where we want to be quite as quickly as he'd wished, but that's one. Number 2 is Mark Bonner. And again, that might come and bite me on the backside in a few months, but I've just been so incredibly impressed with the way he talks and he carries himself. He's done it, hasn't he? Again, we talked about the players that we brought in that have been here and done it at this level recently. Mark Bonner done it at this level very, very recently. It's only, 3 seasons ago, got promoted out of this division. He was massively punching above. Cambridge were massively punching above their weight in League 1 up until, you know, the last couple of months before he was removed. And I don't know, if you're just going to be, it has to be our time, doesn't it?
Let's hope so.
Surely law of averages says that we're going to be successful. We've waited long enough. It's 11 years since we last won League 2. And like you say, since then, we've just been, you know, excuse my language, we've been pissing into the wind, haven't we? battling against the tide all the time. It's, you know, it's been trying to, you know, we had that season under Justin Edinburgh, God rest his soul, in League One, where we was in the top 6 right up until, I think, the final day. But aside from that, it's been generally sort of bottom half League One, attritional football, survival. All right, with Steve Evans for a couple of seasons, it was fun. We was bloody in the noses of a few, but yeah, for far too long, like you said, it's Gillingham have been the underdog. It'd be nice for Gillingham to be one of the fancy teams and justify being one of the fancy teams, more importantly.
Let's hope you can do that. The other question I'm going to ask you, Matt, is what are the reasons to doubt whether you'll achieve your ambitions? And do you think that your reason, which is Gab Galinson's impatience, do you think that could actually go the other way? Because you could argue that can be a negative as well as a positive.
It could be, yeah. And I know there was a few sort of things chucked at us when we removed Stephen Clemence. Oh, we're becoming Watford. We're nowhere near that level. I think if you look in the last sort of 5 years or 3 years, we've had 5 managers, and Watford have had about 20 in the same time. So we're nowhere near the realms of that type of thing. But yeah, what Brad has automatically done by removing a manager after 6 months is increase the pressure on himself to get the next appointment right. He's increased the pressure on Mark Bonner to come in and be successful, because for those that were pro Stephen Clemence and pro Stephen Clemence at least getting more time, the question to be asked is, well, what if we're struggling after 15, 20 games? Does he then remove Mark Bonner and we start again? And then that's a justifiable question. I get that. So, yeah, I think that does bring its own risks. I think...
The other thing, can I just add something to that?
Go on, of course you can.
Which is,
sure, show. You don't have to ask.
yeah, of course. And the other thing I would say, sort of just to interject, there's been a lot of positivity that we've talked about, which I think is brilliant. But I think just we're sort of talking about how we're excited about how it might come together in terms of the attacking pitch, but we've not, unlike other teams who might have been competing in previous seasons, we don't really have a visual. Doncaster, for example, MK Dons, they've got a proven visual blueprint that's already been seen, where, okay, they might have lost a few players from last season, but you can see how the overall structure works in order for them to get really competitive results at this level. With Gillingham, you've got parts of that blueprint, especially in the defensive area, and you've made some great additions towards strengthening the attacking side of it, but there's not a blueprint yet in place. And that's not a criticism of anyone, not at all. But I think I think it's a reason to just say, it might not all come together straight away, because we've not seen it all come together yet, and it might take players a bit of time to find that sort of synergy.
Absolutely, and even the two clubs that you've mentioned, there's examples of it being there. Is look how long it took them. Like, it took MK Dons sacking a manager to get it right last season, and it took Doncaster until March.
It took Doncaster sticking with a manager
to get it right. Yeah, so you know, it shows that there's more than one way to skin a cat in that sense. And I suppose if you go back to the point you asked me about the reasons why it could be our season, and I said Brad Gallinson's enthusiasm and impatience, and I said Mark Bonner, but equally you could say Mark Bonner could be a risk as well, because what if Mark Bonner's that manager that's only successful at Cambridge? I know we've got no other clubs to go off, but he's so intrinsically linked with that football club that it might just not work at Gillingham.
Yeah, I know. I see where you're coming from, and I can see why you would maybe associate it with a kind of a John Coleman or a Keith Hill type thing. But I'm very mindful that I think Mark Bonner has been quite keen since his time at Cambridge to actually put that to one side. And I'm sure he cares for the club, but I think he's been very clear to sort of make a distinction in his mind. And the way, for me, that he's been really using his time out of work to grow as a manager and learn new things and visit elite clubs and go into training sessions and to watch football at all levels. That's the thing that really excites me, because there's other managers who I'm not necessarily going to name, but they have been sort of shortlisted for the Gillingham job, that you might have associated them with one club. They've actually not been as active in their time out of work. And you sort of wonder if they necessarily have that same ambition or drive to get back in. So that's what would really excite me, I think, about Mark Bonner.
And it's a very low risk in terms of saying that Mark Bonner could be a reason why we're not quite as successful as we want to be. Because I just think he's such a football nerd that he probably just soaks in so much information. And like when I spoke to him, and you sort of forget, because oh, he didn't play the game professionally, so was he hindered in that way? But then he said no and put me right very quickly. I'm not hindered because I started soaking up all this coaching knowledge at the age of 17. So he's massively ahead of the 8 ball in terms of that experience at 38. So no, it probably came across the wrong way in terms of saying that he could be a risk but that's purely because he's only ever been associated with, aside from 6 months at Southend, he's only ever been associated with Cambridge United. And you see it with players more often where, it doesn't work at 6 or 7 clubs and then they turn up at one club and score 25 in a season and that type of thing. But no, I'd say that's a very low risk in terms of Mark Bonham being a reason that we're not successful, but it's still there, isn't it? It's something that you just have to be very slightly aware of.
Yeah, I get that. So balancing those things then, I think it's fair to say that the positives massively outweigh the negatives. I'm sure you'd agree with that. So with that in mind, give me too early for a prediction, I think, but give me a number. Give me a number between 1 and 10, Matt, that sort of denotes your level of optimism for the season ahead and that you'll achieve your ambitions.
7 or 8.
Which one?
7.5. I'll go 8 while we're positive, while we can be positive. And hope, hope if it goes wrong, people would have forgotten because it's only June.
Oh, brilliant stuff. Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat.
I've really enjoyed it, mate. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks to everyone for watching at home. This has been the EFL Debate Summer Deep Dive on Gillingham. Plenty uploaded already onto YouTube and Spotify. Plenty more coming up. We'll see you again next time.